You know, the reason most people spend years practicing without ever becoming truly elite? It's not a lack of talent. It's that they are trapped in the wrong loop. We're going to show you the three-step system for competence acceleration that can compress a decade of learning into a single year.
This quote right here, it just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? We've all been sold this idea of the 10,000-hour rule, that mastery is just a function of time. But what if that's only half the picture? What if the way you practice matters infinitely more than how long you practice? Well, that's what this is all about. Understanding that difference between just spinning your wheels and actually getting somewhere amazing. And that really is the promise here. We are not talking about tiny, incremental improvements. We are talking about a fundamental shift in how you learn, a way to radically shorten that curve. It's not some kind of magic trick. It's a system, and it's based on how our brains are actually wired to learn. It's a method for kicking your development into high gear. So, you're probably asking, how does it all work?
Glad you asked. We're going to walk through this in 5 parts. First, we need to understand the problem, so we'll look at the wrong loop and what we call the Plateau of Mediocrity. Then, we dive into the solution, the 3-step protocol, and the incredible science behind it in building a faster brain. And finally, we'll tie it all together with the mastery loop.
All right, let's kick things off by busting a huge myth right out of the gate. We tend to think experience and expertise are the same thing, right? We assume that if someone's been doing a job for 10 years, they must be an expert. But the truth is, after a certain point, more time on the job often leads to, well, zero improvement. Why is that? Because most of what we call experience is just passive repetition. It's not practice, it's just performance. And this is the critical distinction. When you just do the thing you already know how to do, you're not getting any better. You're just reinforcing the neural pathways you've already built. Think about your daily commute. You've probably driven that route thousands of times, but are you a better driver because of it? I mean, probably not. See, high performers get this. They don't just put in the hours. They engineer specific ways to get feedback, focusing on improvement, not just on completing the task. And that's the real game changer.
Okay, so now let's meet the villain of our story. It's a biological process that's actually designed to help us, but it ends up being the single biggest reason we stop growing. It's called the Plateau of Mediocrity. And it's a trap your own brain sets for you because it loves to be efficient.
So the process that creates this plateau is called automaticity.
You know, when you first learn anything, let's say it's a new chord on a guitar, it takes a ton of conscious effort. Your brain is burning a massive amount of energy. But our brains are fundamentally lazy. They're energy misers. So their main goal is to make that hard thing as easy as possible. They work to turn that conscious struggle into an unconscious, automatic habit. Now, this is great for stuff like tying your shoes, but it is the absolute death of improvement when it comes to complex skills.
Just look at this. This is basically a handoff happening inside your head. When you're actively learning something new, the thinking part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex over on the left, is running the show. It's working hard, it's burning energy, and most importantly, it's spotting errors. But as soon as you get good enough, your brain shifts the task over to its autopilot center, the basal ganglia on the right. This saves a ton of energy, but, and here is the giant catch, autopilot stops looking for errors. It just assumes the way you're doing it is fine, and boom, you're stuck.
And what's the result of getting stuck? This number says it all. Once you're on that plateau of mediocrity, how much do you actually improve? The research is pretty shocking. Often, the answer is 0. A big fat 0. You can spend years, literally years, doing the same thing over and over without getting one bit better. To improve, you have to break that automation. You have to make the task hard again.
So how in the world do we escape this biological trap? I mean, you can't just try harder. That doesn't work. What you need is an engineered system. So now, let's meet the hero of our story, the 3-step acceleration protocol. This is a framework designed specifically to shatter that automaticity and force your brain back into that high-growth learning state.
This protocol has 3 core parts that all work together. First, the Deconstruction Audit, where we figure out what really matters. Second, the immediate feedback loop, which is the true engine of all growth. And third, the resistance threshold, where we find that perfect sweet spot of difficulty that forces us to adapt. Okay, let's break each one down.
The first step is all about ruthless focus. You know, when we try to learn something complex, our instinct is to do everything at once, but that just overloads our brain. Think of your short-term memory like the RAM on your computer. it's got a pretty limited capacity. If you try to learn a new language by tackling grammar, vocabulary, and pronunciation all at the same time, your brain just crashes. You don't learn anything effectively.
So, the solution is to deconstruct. Break the skill down into its smallest, most fundamental parts. We can call them micro skills. Then, you apply the classic 80-20 rule. Which 20% of these little skills will actually give you 80% of your results? For a writer, maybe it's not about having a huge vocabulary, but just about mastering the art of writing a killer opening sentence. For a salesperson, maybe it's not the closing technique, but simply active listening. By focusing all your energy on that one high-leverage microskill, you avoid cognitive overload and make the biggest possible dent in your overall ability.
All right, step 2. And honestly, if you take only one thing away from all of this, let it be this. The single biggest variable in how fast you learn is not your talent, and it's not time. It's the speed of your feedback loop.
This right here shows why most feedback is completely useless. Let's say you're practicing your golf swing. You hit 100 balls. A week goes by, and your coach finally looks at a video and tells you what you did wrong. The problem is the gap. Too much time has passed. Your brain has absolutely no way to connect that piece of advice to the specific set of neurons that fired incorrectly a week ago. The chance to learn is just gone.
This is why the loop has to be brutally, relentlessly immediate. You need a system where you see the difference between what you wanted to do and what you actually did within seconds. That creates a powerful, undeniable error signal. And it's that signal, and only that signal, that screams to your brain, hey, that thing you just did, that was wrong, pay attention. That immediate error signal is the trigger for a real, physical upgrade in your brain.
Okay, so you've isolated the key microskill. You've set up an immediate feedback loop. The final piece of this puzzle is finding the perfect level of difficulty. Your brain, just like a muscle, will not grow unless it's pushed against some meaningful resistance. But here's the thing, too much resistance is just as useless as too little.
And this is the sweet spot for growth. Researchers have actually figured out the ideal ratio for learning, about 70% success and 30% failure. Think about that. If you're succeeding 100% of the time, you're not in the learning zone, you're in the performance zone, you're not growing. If you're failing all the time, you just get frustrated and give up. That 70-30 split is the magic. The success keeps you motivated, but it's the 30% of failures that provide those essential error signals your brain desperately needs to get better. It's all about productive struggle.
And now for the big aha moment. We've talked about the protocol, the what and the how, but now let's get into the why. Why does this specific 3-step system work so much better than just grinding away for hours? Well, the answer isn't psychological, it's physiological. We are literally talking about a physical construction project happening inside your skull.
So what is really going on at a biological level when you use this protocol? How does a simple error signal transform into something real, something tangible that makes you faster, smarter, and more intuitive? The answer comes down to one incredible substance called myelin. The best way to think about it is this. Imagine the circuits in your brain are like raw copper wires. Myelin is the fatty white insulation that gets wrapped around those wires. And the more layers of myelin a circuit has, the faster and more cleanly the signal travels down that wire. That instant intuition that experts seem to have, it's not magic, it's not a bigger brain, it's a brain with more heavily myelinated high-speed circuits for that specific skill.
This is where it all comes together. The 3-step protocol is basically a myelin-building machine. Step 1, deconstruction, tells your brain exactly which wire to focus on. And steps 2 and 3, the immediate feedback and that 30% failure rate, they act as a signal to the construction crew in your brain, essentially telling them, hey, this wire right here is important, but it's not working right. Wrap it, insulate it, make it faster. You are literally physically building a better, faster brain.
So let's bring this all home. The old way of thinking about expertise was all about counting hours. But the new model, the Competence Acceleration model, is about counting high-quality feedback loops. Time is just the container. The loops are what actually fill it with progress.
So, the path to mastery, it's not some big secret. It's a system. Deconstruct the scale to find what truly matters. Tighten that feedback loop until it's instantaneous. And always operate at that perfect 70-30 threshold of resistance. That is the engine that drives real accelerated growth.
Because in the end, it's not about working harder. It's about working smarter. It's about building a system that works with your brain's biology, not against it.
When you master this loop of deconstruction, immediate feedback, and productive resistance, you build a powerful, undeniable engine for improvement. And you finally stop just counting the hours, and you truly start making the hours count.